Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, and you?
I'm well.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Barbara Jean,
Good.
how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Terrific. Are you well enough to expand on what you wrote?
I can do so a little bit because it's kind of heavy to do it by phone, but we'll have to let.
No, we go where to go. I think it's
Okay.
I've written something in conjunction to all of that. I think we're seeing something, pieces of the puzzle, right? I don't know whether you're going to see all of the puzzle yet, but I think we're seeing pieces of it. I think that's a discussion of it will help. So.
I don't know if we'll ever see all of the puzzle until we actually transcend into the light that we are. But anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you challenged us, and you always do this. You drop these bombs, these thought bombs, and you said that light doesn't dispel darkness; it balances it. And I was thinking back to when we used to talk about lighting a candle in a stadium.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of darkness, you could see that light. So that reminded me more of what you were talking about, that it doesn't dispel it, it balances it. It balances it enough for you to be able to see. But it doesn't get rid of it. It doesn't go away. And you said when the understanding and wisdom are balanced, knowledge is birthed. And so that reminded me of the tree of life, when we talked about the essence of and the 10 emanations, the 10 light emanations on the tree of life. Then you said knowledge is spiritual experience between the creator and the created. And that implies that knowledge is more than knowing about something. It's experiencing something. It's deeper than being aware of. It's actually being it, whatever that it is, whatever that spiritual it is. That's what knowledge is from the mystical perspective.
Barbara, one second. You said that it is deeper than
being aware.
Being aware of something, right?
Yeah.
Somebody, would you mute your phone, please? It's deeper than being aware of something. Suppose that I don't want to have background noise. Would you, everyone check and make sure your phones are muted? So everyone check and make sure your phone is muted. I don't know what that is. Are you guys able to hear with this noise?
I can hear, but I can hear the background too.
Okay, I don't know where it's coming from. But anyway, suppose that the entity atom, right, was made aware of itself, and then it began to experience itself, meaning have knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And that experience was something that we experienced with what we call the third eye. Because you don't see with the third eye, you experience with it, right? So, suppose what that experience was this physical world. And that's why this world came into being.
Mm.
And the reason it came into being was so that creation of Elohim and Elohim image could be complete. And that creation is not completed yet. Because this physical world is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And has not been transformed yet.
Mm.
How does that relate to what you wrote?
It resonates. It resonates. One of the sages said that, that the Creator created man so it could experience itself. And the physical world is an opportunity for us to sort of like reverse it so that we can experience ourselves, the true spiritual entity that we are. And that's sort of like what Jacob's Ladder is talking about, where you move from seeing the physical that perhaps is created or seen through the third eye, you actually do move back to experiencing the created entity that you truly are.
Okay.
So but anyway, I started thinking, yeah.
So that means that we are still at that same place that Nicodemus experienced, right?
Many of us, yeah.
Both the whole of humanity is at that place. All of us are at that same place.
Is that a question or just a thought?
A little of both, more of a thought. That all of us are at that same place. And Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, is talking to us now. And saying to us, you think that, you have thought rather, that you knew where you were,
Mm-hmm.
that you thought that you were quote unquote saved, you thought that you were on your way to heaven. You thought all of these
Anyhow.
Yeah. All these religious things you have thought. However, in order for you to really see where you are, you have to return to beginning. So that's why you wrote what you wrote. That's why what we're talking about is because this concept of being born again is not talking about all over again as much as it's talking about a starting all over again or going back to see where you need to go as opposed to where you think you've been. Like reversing course.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like a pulling you away from the abyss of this illusion of reality.
Yes.
And reminding you that you're more than that. That's not who you are. Because this abyss of the illusion of reality is all of the chaos that we're seeing.
And if indeed man is brought into this earth to experience itself, then the man itself, as we know it, the human is chaotic. Suppose that all the chaos that was in the deep was actually humans, or the essence of the human. And there is no order for the human. It's always chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
because the human is the body, and the body without energy deteriorates, as does anything else without energy or without life. It deteriorates. If you detach a limb from a tree, it deteriorates because it has been detached from its source of life. So the body itself gets caught up in religion, and in doing so, it metaphorically detaches itself from its source of life, and that results in chaos.
And so this chaos that we are seeing, not only individually, but this is all over the world. This moment in this thing called time, this point in creation, or gets everybody's attention because it's sort of like the light switch came on a little bit, like the light dispelled the darkness a little bit for mankind. It knows that this degree of chaos is not who it is or what it was created to endure or experience. And so
go ahead.
Go. So the physical is simply a reflection of all of the stuff is a reflection of the opposite of truth, the truth of who we are. But it had to come to this extent, because otherwise you just go on over the abyss, fall into ignorance, fall into fall off the cliff, so to speak. Like we followed the Donald Trump off of the cliff, sort of thing.
Yeah.
From a spiritual perspective, we were following the chaos off the cliff, rather than it's an opportunity. It's a checking time in a sense. It's one of those moments, like you remember we talked about. There was an opportunity for Moses, an opportunity for Abraham to really grasp and understand who they were. Well, this is one of those moments in that epoch, in that time period, in this world that is a moment for us.
Right. I've been writing this morning. I've had some experiences, and those experiences relate to something different in terms of anything I've experienced before. This whole idea of bringing order to this chaos. Suppose it's simply about understanding the real reason Jesus came. Suppose Jesus came in order to show us how to flip this switch that gives us open access to everything that's not seen, yet does not grant us the necessary ability to explain it. And when we talk about something resonating, is more of an experience of those spiritual things that cannot be articulated verbally. And right now, we are on the precipice of flipping that switch and understanding that There is no such thing as light as we see it. What we call light is a reflection of life itself. I had written something this morning, and one of the things I wrote was that life and energy are the same thing. There's no difference between life, energy, and light. Because, honestly, neither one of those can actually be defined. They can be described. That makes sense? Energy.
Yeah, it's like it's like the emanations. It's all the same. It's like light, but you know, they're just say they're different tubes of light, different tubes. One might be red, one might be green, one might be yellow, but the light or the emanation that flows through it is what gives it the perception of difference. This different color of red, this different color of blue, etc. But what's in it, the essence that flows through it, it has no color, and it is the same. It's just our perceptions sometimes that color, quote unquote, things.
Now, I want to ask you if you can take all of that and relate it to what you wrote.
Well, what after reading what you said and then thinking about it, the thing that I guess got me is when you talked about mankind becoming aware of its continued uninterrupted experience with the Creator. That's when I started thinking about, then you asked the question, is this the balance you're seeking? I started thinking about the tree of life and how the tree of life is us. It is the choices that we make, the decisions that we make that create the type of fruit that we yield. And the bottom line thing I said was that the tree is in the seed. And so sometimes when we have greed, or we have envy in our lives, or we have hate, whatever, that's unripened fruit. And our actions are based on our physical action, our physical actions are based on these spiritual things. That spiritual fruit that's unripened, it's not good for what we need it to be. As opposed to ripened fruit, it's only when we made a decision that whatever we do, we're going to do for the good of mankind. And when we say that and we do that, and we mean that, it points to our understanding or knowing that my neighbor is me, or that I am my neighbor. And if we are each other, then we are created. We are part of the Ein Sof. We are one, in other words. And it is this sharing of understanding that, for lack of a better word, we're all in this together, sort of thing, because we literally are, and we spiritually are all in this together. So as one entity, is dealing with something, it affects the whole. Whatever happens in Belarus, whatever happens in the United States, whatever happens in other countries, Somalia, it affects the whole. And what we've done to heighten the chaos is that we've tried to pull away from it and separate ourselves from it as a country and isolate ourselves from other countries and say, no, I'm not my brother's keeper. That's what we're in essence saying. When to be my brother's keeper is to acknowledge that my brother is me and I am my brother. And so there is no way I could not care about what's going on, because that's happening to me. And so it all relates to the fruit, the type of fruit that we are spiritually feasting on. And if it's unripe, it continues the chaos. It continues the illusion of separateness. It continues the idea that we have, not the knowledge, not spiritual knowledge, but the idea that we have that I'm bigger, better, greater than something else. Does that resonate? Hello? Hello?
Barbara?
I'm sorry, it does resonate.
Yeah, I just need, not just you, Pastor, but anybody that, because everybody else, because if it's not resonating, I need to try to explain it differently, because it's sort of like the foundation of where I'm going from here.
Yeah, but Barbara, it does resonate, and I think that, for a period of time, we have been, caught up in terms of, looking at the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as a way of, living in the world. And I believe that, we need to move from being confused in terms of separation and division, and understand and appreciate that we have the opportunity to move in the tree of life. So I think that in the teachings that, we've been receiving and the communications that we have been engaged with, I think not only are some of us coming to the point that we can accept and acknowledge that we are Elohim, but being able to now, be in that uninterrupted experience with the Creator, that we can continually just stay focused and realize that I need to move from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and now operate in the tree of life, where I can stay connected and not be confused by the way of the world, if that makes sense.
That resonates. So that's, oh, go ahead. Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I'm done.
Thank you. Anybody else? Does it resonate with anybody else? I just need to know that it resonates.
Miss Barbara, for me it does, but I have a question. In the picture that you were drawing, when we talked about the energy that comes through the tubes and that it's our perception that gives it the coloring, would that be, is that, in terms of what you were explaining just now, would that be us? We have the same energy resonating through us, but when we go into our selfish perception, that's what makes the color change? That's how we change?
In a sense.
Okay.
In a sense, the closer we are to this illusion of physicality, we get this density that we want to put things in a box, which means, well, the color's in a box, and we tend to focus on the color rather than the fact that the essence of what's flowing is the same.
Okay.
It's only our perception that gives it the different colorings, and we tend to look at the colorings. I got red, and red is better than anything. You got purple, but my red is better than your purple. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
We tend to get selfish about that, and we look at the colors conceptually instead of the essence of what's flowing through the colors, what's flowing through the tubes.
Well, even speaking scientifically, your emotions determines the colors of your aura, if you want to look at it from that perspective.
That's true.
So I think that is a good euphemism for what you're talking about, or an example of what you're talking about. But based upon what's being said, that suppose that Adam put in a state of unconsciousness, not so much, and the making or the giving of the partnership was not so much what we think it is as it was to relieve this being of its spiritual image. Suppose that was one of the purposes of it. And it had to work its way back to it. So
you're saying it created space between the being knowing its spiritual image and it is that what I hear you saying? It creates, okay.
Yeah. Because I'm saying that if you being a nurse, in order for you to create a nurse, then the mere fact of you bringing an entity into being or into existence doesn't make it a nurse. It would have to do the things that a nurse does in order to be a nurse. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, this entity, Adam, was brought into being in the image and likeness of Elohim. It has the same traits, but it does not become Elohim. It does not become the nurse until it begins to utilize those traits as the nurses utilize them, or as Elohim does. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, that being the case, then suppose that this thing that we call the physical world are actually the materials necessary for creation on our part. This is the substance that's needed for creation on our part. And without the distractions of the physicality, there would be no real commitment, because there would not be any choices to make, to cling to the physical or to strive for the spiritual, or to long for the spiritual. And that longing comes from that deep-seated sense of knowing is more than this, or we're more than what it appears to be. That longing to be spiritual comes from that. And all of this physical stuff is a distraction, and it takes Yeshua to come along to give a sense of a spiritual nature in order to move from religious rituals that keep us anchored in the physicality with no chance to move beyond that. And now, because there is a desire to move beyond that, we are beginning to see that the physical world, inclusive of us, of course, is a pictorial of what we are to use to bring this tree of life into existence, meaning that a tree of life, excuse me, speaks more to a type of energy in the earth that prevails over everything that does not enhance the life or enhance humanity. There's the tree of life, an understanding of this tree of life is a transformation from a quest for the physical accoutrements of this world to the spiritual reality of our existence. Even though the physicality of this world still exists, it does not control our attitude towards what life is. Because when we talk about living a good life, we are talking about things as opposed to attitudes. So without the possibility of a distraction, would there be a true realization of being that creative entity to bring into existence the energy, the life that humanity
Did we lose them?
Yeah, I'm going to try to call them on my phone and connect if I can remember exactly how to do that. Okay, hold on.
I got it. I'm calling him just a second.
Oh, okay.
us becoming more acquainted with our spiritual nature. But if you look at the scriptures, it says that Jesus was a higher form or a superior Adam or a different type of Adam. It didn't say Elohim. So suppose that's what Jesus was doing. He came to show us how to take the substance in this earth realm attitudes and mold them into Elohim, being who we were created to be. That is Elohim, loving kindness, forgiveness, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And more than that, this is something that our, the faith teachers and the faith group has been pressing and trying to achieve. But it's only when we understood that we are doing it on behalf of mankind that now mankind has that opportunity too. This pandemic occurred so that it could literally cut people off from certain things that are major distractions. And while everyone will not take advantage of understanding and going inside oneself, in a sense, as a matter of speaking, to understand oneself spiritually, a lot of people have. And it's made a difference in terms of what you see. There are people who have money who are sharing that now, whereas before they wouldn't have thought of doing that. And there are some who have money who made a decision that, hey, this is not what I'm going to do, and I'm going to just try to get more. But the extremes are what mankind sees now. The extreme chaos versus the extreme kindness, instances of kindness. That's what people are seeing. And it's like what you said about the atom, the sleep created opportunity for it to, the space that's separated for it to not remember as much of the spiritual thing that it was. But that's the creative thing that Elohim has given us. That's our way to create. There's that space that's been created. And whereas it created space so that physicality could come into existence in terms of our perception that it is, that it's given us the opportunity to create that space where mankind can understand its place as a spiritual entity. And not just our small group, but it's like it's opened it up, the opportunity, not necessarily that everybody will take advantage, but the opportunity in the macro that everybody can grasp that concept that I'm more than what I thought it was. That I don't need, I'm sorry, that's my phone. I don't need to be in the midst of a lot of people to feel like I'm not alone. That I can be by myself and know that I'm not alone. I don't know if that resonates or not.
It does, because I think 20 years ago maybe, when Kathy was doing a conference, she researched that word alone and found that there was no Hebrew word for loneliness, because there is no such thing as that when we know who we are. Of course, at that time, we didn't have this depth of understanding. But yes, it does indeed resonate. I want to share this. I wasn't going to do it, but for the last 3 nights, I've been having a recurring dream, but a sequential dream. Recurring in that it's the same reference, the same thing, but sequential in that it started at one place and progressed to another. The first night was Thursday night, or was it? No, it was Wednesday night, and I saw this country. It was like a bird's eye view of it, and if you can imagine a cake in the shape of this country sitting on the cake plate, that's shaped exactly like it is, and the cake is sliding off, and you're trying to push it back onto the plate without damaging it. That's what I saw. Me pushing this back, this country falling apart, and trying to hold it together, pushing it back to where it was. And the next night, it was a sense of my seeing it, not just this country, but everything in terms of the world, and getting and soliciting other people to help, but to no avail. But last night was different. I kept having these visions, not of seeing light, but of an explanation of light and life and energy, what it is. And one of the recurring things to me was that life is actually dormant energy. And there was no difference between life and energy itself. And I actually was shown how to use this light, this energy, for the benefit of humanity. However, I can't explain it now. And in seeing that, in experiencing that, all of these questions began to come to me. And the conclusion was, this is how you save the world. And I started asking, the question that came to me were, what is energy? What is dark energy? The difference between dark and light energy. And none of those questions have answers. Even though, of course, physics tells us that energy is a property that is transferred to an object for work or to heat it. That's not a definition. That's talking about what it does. So, as a result of that, I began to write. And the thing that stuck out to me more than anything else is the reason things deteriorate is not only because they are built to be temporal, but it's because the life is taken away from them. The reason a house deteriorates if you don't live in it, not only because you are not there, but everything in that house has been separated from its life source. Even, for example, the wood in the house has been separated from its life source, which is a tree. However, if you're in that house, you are the life source for everything that's in it, which means that it's not your body that does it, it's your energy that keeps it alive, which says to me that it speaks to the idea of being Elohim, because things are drawing life from you, or from it. And the you is not the body from which it draws the life, it's the energy that it draws from, because you can experience a lack of energy or a misdirection of it simply by being in the presence of someone or outside of the presence of anyone. The energy flow is different, so the life source is different. And I was showing how it is impossible to see objects with our eye. We only see experiences with our eye and objects with our eyes, and that is the reason our eyes are the source of our distractions for the purpose of pushing us to desire the experience of the eye. And this whole concept of ritual and religion are disconnected or are separate from the source of life, and that's the reason it is such a struggle to keep it afloat. And the decimation of the leadership and the perpetuators of this lack of light and life is actually not coming to an end as much as being exposed. That's why the church has to always have something else to do, because there is no life in it. So it has to give your eyes something to see, because it can't give your soul anything to experience. However, if indeed it is life-giving, then the soul has the experiences and it doesn't need to see the objects of that religion in terms of the calisthenics that takes place in with the singing and with the with the raising of the hands and all the other ritualistic calisthenics that are experienced in those settings. And now we are at the, not the fork in the road as much as we are at the place where we are being shown the true nature of what life is, and a deeper or greater understanding of the difference between what we thought the tree of life is and what we thought the tree of knowledge of good and evil are. We are being shown that these concepts are concepts that we can now articulate. We've known that they are concepts, yet a clearer understanding of them was elusive. And now it isn't. It's like the robe is being taken off, and a revelation of what life is being shown. A knowledge of energy, an experience of energy is the tree of life, an energy that's beneficial, an energy that you can look at and say is beneficial to humanity. And the robe is being taken off of this knowledge of good and evil, ripe and unripeness, so that we can see that the type of thing that we talk about, I love you with the love of God, is unripeness, as opposed to simply loving, period. And this missionary thing is about selfish attitudes seeking to bring others into a religious venture as opposed to a place of deliverance. So the whole concept of the mission, a missionary, is in itself unripened, but the ripeness of it is to bring, it is about deliverance and righteousness as opposed to congregating in places together to perpetuate a denominational belief that has no life in it. Neither does it have any hope in it. So what I'm seeing is more of a sense of understanding that even though life is daunting in terms of articulating it, it is no longer elusive, because we are beginning to see that Adam was purposely shown what could be in terms of the physical world so that it could bring it into existence for the purpose of bringing this new earth into existence. And this idea of a new heaven and a new earth, the new heaven is not a new revelation of light. It is a revelation of light that Adam never had, that mankind never had or never embraced. And with this comes a new consciousness in the earth as a result of the enlightenment that has been embraced by humanity. And this in itself speaks to the tree of life, which is referenced as the New Jerusalem, which is a fresh sense of righteousness that is cultivated by love and kindness, built upon a foundation of love, with, in the midst of it, of this righteousness, is a type of healing that supersedes anger and supersedes a desire for revenge or to get even. A type of healing that lends itself to bringing about harmony with the ones who have been not only deceptive but have also been diabolical in the way that they have dealt with humanity. Without even thinking about whether or not it should be done, it is done. This type of healing. I connect the tree in the midst of this righteousness to the tree of knowledge, the good and evil, and the tree of life. All of those are interrelated because they speak to more of an experience than they speak to something that can be audibly articulated. Please mute your phone. What is the noise in the background? Everyone, please mute your phone. If you're trolling, that's fine. We can speak to you too. So what I'm seeing is that we are at a crucial point. And that crucial point where we are is experience of the completion of creation itself. And the completion of creation itself is not in our hands, or it's not in the hands of the initial creator, but it's in our hands to embrace it. Because even though you want me to be a nurse, if I don't embrace it, I never will be one. However, if I embrace it, then that can become my reality. So when we embrace this creation in the same manner that we have been in the same manner that our Creator presented it to us, it is then that creation becomes complete. It does not mean that there's going to be an absence of anger. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. If that were the case, then there would not be for a tree of healing. The healing brings about opportunity for those attitudes that are adverse to harmony to be brought into a place of harmony with everyone else. that is the reason the scripture talks about love being able to cover a multitude of entanglements or sin. And the multitude of entanglements speak to the concept or the idea of, without regard to how many entanglements or how different they may be, love is strong enough to embrace them and to bring such a healing to them until they become a part of this foundation of love within themselves, so that this false sense of separation, of division, is no longer a factor that results in humanity being relegated to remaining a human and never becoming what it was destined to become. Does all that make sense? Or are there any questions or comments?
This is Barbara, just a comment. When you said that we embrace creation, when at the point when we embrace creation in the same manner that the Creator presented it to us, it made me think about that that Hebrew something that one of the sages said, that, you know, as much as the calf wants to suckle, the cow wants to be sucked. In other words, the balance is that what's provided for me is exactly what I need if I embrace that and receive it.
Yes. And the Creator, we must have the same desire to embrace the creation that's been presented to us as the Creator has for us to embrace it. And that in itself is that uninterrupted relationship, the uninterrupted attitude, the uninterrupted thought pattern that keeps us in a place of harmony. It doesn't mean that things will not flow through your mind that are contrary to who we are or created to be. It doesn't mean it won't flow through your mind. Even though it flows through your mind because your soul transforms it. It doesn't expel it, it transforms it. And the transformation of that energy of thought that flows through the mind flows through others with the same thought, with transformation taking place. Therefore, we are in a place to bring redemption to humanity right now by virtue of not being uncomfortable with embracing essence of our creation, even though we may not know the purpose of it. Any questions? Comments? Come on. Okay.
So,
go ahead.
So, this is Barbara. When we say then that the tree is in the seed kind of concept, and what you just described was the tree being in the seed. And what you described when you talked about the atom that was put to sleep, so that it could purposely be shown, the physical world could bring into existence the new heaven and the new earth, that new consciousness. The new consciousness is the seed of what Adam came from. The essence of sharing with everybody. The essence of not being selfish. The essence of wanting to do the right thing for everybody because it's the right thing to do. And not seeing myself as separate from anybody else. That we are all one. That's the seed. Because from one came many. And when you understand that we, the many, are one, we're simply different reflections of that same oneness that is the Creator. When we understand that, then that's how we understand that all that we can be as the seed, as we grow spiritually, we can be all that we can be based on the destiny of how the Creator and what the Creator created us to be.
Not only that, we don't have a choice except to be what we were created to be if we embrace that. What am I saying? The acorn cannot desire to result in being a pine tree. It has to be an oak. It embraces being an oak, and that's all it would be. And it cannot look at itself and call itself a pine tree. It's an oak. And if it calls itself a pine tree, then it becomes as a pine tree is, and that is with shallow roots. Not able to withstand storms as would an oak. So when we embrace that, we cease to seek to be a pine tree and embrace the reality of being an oak tree. Any questions?
This is Audrey. I have a comment.
Okay.
When you talked about embracing what we are, even though we don't fully know what that means. Yeah, I can see the metaphor of the seed, because the seed doesn't know what it is to become, but it knows it has the experience of the tree within it. And I think when we embrace the experience of knowing who we are in the Creator, then it's the Creator who's going to provide as us as the seed. It's the Creator who's going to provide the water and the sunlight and the whatever other nutrients we need. But if we embraced being the seed and the Creator provides what we need to be nourished, then we develop, and we have no choice but to develop into what it is that we were created to be, if we embrace the experience and the idea of who we are from the beginning, I think.
I agree. that makes all the sense in the world. Anyone else?
Yeah, tangentially speaking, with all that was said today, I started off very early thinking about when you mentioned lightness and darkness, and to think that when you and Miss Barbara were talking about it earlier today, there actually is no real difference between the two, and they're actually one in the same, in that uh, all of it is, as you would think, reflected, a reflection, excuse me, of light bouncing back to us. However, the darkness or the blackness is only a culmination of all the different colors at once, excuse me, that perceives to be black, but in their essence is all actually light, but just perceived in different ways and unable to exist without the other. Like I said, it's not two separate things; they are the same. Um, and not trying to sound metaphorical, but just to accentuate the point that it's still the same exact essence. And even in the way that the same way, because light is a type of energy that is just seen from a material standpoint, but it means the same thing from a spiritual standpoint. Sound does the same exact thing. When we think about a sound, you have a combination of different notes that make up a song, a tune, or whatever, even the way that we speak in communicating to one another. But just as important as each single note is also every single pause. And it, because of that, it would be impossible to even have one continuous sound because it is actually changing. And even further, sound itself, which is energy, which is a wave, never ceases to exist at all. It only gets to the point that we no longer can detect it for whatever reason. Example being, as we get older, how our eardrums work, um, we're unable to detect certain frequencies that a baby could detect, but then maybe a teenager couldn't detect. And then that teenager can, of course, detect and hear sounds that a full grown adult can't hear. But the sound always exists. And even I say that because, well, I say that to make the point that even in that perceived pause, there's still sound. It's just not detected. And I say all of that to once again make the point that the sense of separation does not exist at all.
That makes sense. Any questions about that?
I don't have any questions about it, but I can concur with Sheldon in terms of me seeing it in a different way. On some occasions, I have the opportunity to, work at night, and sometimes when I meditate, I have the opportunity of seeing darkness, total darkness, turn into light. However, it's all still the same shades of color, just going through different transformations. But to be able to see it is in that same exact way where you can see it transferring from light to day, but it's from night to day, but you see it in terms of the same energy or the same power. So I just wanted to share that thought in terms of me actually visualizing that and meditating on it. I'm done.
Thank you, George. I really appreciate that. It was almost one of the most important parts that I left out that I was thinking about earlier, as well as everyone was speaking. That darkness that we talk about, the same as that pause, actually allows for more creativity, more options, whatever you might want to call it, for something in a sense to be created. In terms of dreaming, typically when you meditate, pray, or whatever, even when you're trying to focus and you're trying to, in a sense, change the reality that you experience or that's in front of you, or even if you're trying to even imagine something differently, typically when you are in darkness, it aids in that pursuit. When there is, so it's as if in the midst of the darkness, as well as in the midst of the pause where there is no sound, so to speak, there are infinite number of possibilities. I think someone on the phone may have incidentally unmuted your phone. Can everyone please mute their phone?
Okay. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You talked earlier about being born again, and my question is, are we always being born? Is it a continual process that we're constantly being born, reborn or whatever, rebirth or whatever?
Ask yourself a question. When we talk about being born, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or birth, there are elements that take place prior to. Before there is a birth, there is the need to constitute a body in a womb. Before there can be the spirit placed in that body. So when we start talking about being reborn, the question becomes, are we talking about being reborn through the process of reconstituting a body? No. We're talking about through the process of the reconstitution of a soul, or the reconstitution of a being. The scripture says that he breathed in out of his nostrils and it became a living soul. So what is that? If we look at Genesis 1 and 26, we see the constitution and the birth of a spiritual being. If we look at Genesis 2, around, I think it's 2 and 7, we see the fashioning of a being from the dust of the earth. And it is my contention that this is the pictorial that the being was given, a physical entity being fashioned in a spiritual way. This is what I'm saying. If you close your eyes and you can see yourself put your key on a key ring or put your key in the ignition, the key is not in the ignition physically, but it is there in your mind. So suppose this fashioning from the dust was a physical entity being shown in the mind of the Adam / Elohim at the same time. And this pictorial of that in the mind was the world that was going to become a reality based upon the entity called Adam bringing the physical world into existence. In that regard, we have opportunity to be reborn or to be reconstituted on a continuous basis, yes. Any questions about that? that help you?
Yes. So you're saying if we are in the mind of the Creator as a particular entity, or if we're in the mind of the Creator, we can, I don't know how to put this, we can fashion ourselves as something different because we are part of the Creator?
No, I'm not talking about us fashioning ourselves at all. I'm talking about being fashioned. We have opportunity to be what we were created to be, not to refashion. That's the problem. We have done that. We have refashioned ourselves. Now, I'm not talking about bodily, physically. I'm talking about spiritually. We have made ourselves Baptists and Methodists. We have made ourselves Jews and Muslims.
Mhm.
You know, so we have refashioned ourselves, and that has in itself become the problem.
Well, I guess I was thinking of going the other way, not toward the Muslim or the Christian or the whatever. I'm going the other way.
No, we can't refashion ourselves into what we already been fashioned into.
Okay.
It's like, you know, we can't take a bicycle and make it a car.
Well, isn't that refashioning? I mean, but you're making it into something else.
No. But
Okay.
she's starting out refashioning it into something it wasn't in the beginning.
Okay.
We can't do that. We can pretend all we want. It's like the oak tree trying to pretend it's a pine tree. We live the lives of physical beings, and the idea of being spiritual is secondary. The whole concept of spirituality is not even brought into major thought or question unless someone dies or is on the brink of death. Then we start talking about it. However, in our daily lives, we are more consumed with what we see as opposed to who we are.
So the things that we used to hear in church where people say, the things I used to do, I don't do anymore, the things I used to think, say, act.
Yeah.
Does that pertain to what you're saying now?
No, it does and it doesn't. It does in that all that is stuff of guilt as opposed to reality. And it doesn't in that we were never designed to be caught up in those things anyway. Like, the whole idea, what is it that you don't do anymore? And my whole thing with that has always been, since I've been pastoring, is this. The only reason you don't, because you're too old. You can't do it no more. Or you never wanted to do it in the first place. Why? Because those concepts about church and religion, people deal with those when it does not apply to them. The things that apply to them, they don't talk about. So that's out the window anyway. I'm talking about the spiritual things the spiritual entity that we were created to be, the spiritual attitude, personality that we have, the essence of our Creator that we are. This is what I'm talking about. These are the lifelines that we have been given in order for us to be fashioned into the likeness that we were created in. And that fashioning comes by virtue of how we relate to humanity itself, rising above the distraction of this physical world and being more in tune with the spiritual world. That is what Jesus meant when he talked about being in this world but not of it. I'm in this world of distractions, but I'm not distracted by it. It does not consume me.
Well, I wasn't talking about the religious part, but my main focus was talking about the spiritual aspect of it, because again, with the religious part, I'm not even interested in that. I was just talking about the spiritual part.
The church doesn't talk about the spiritual part.
I know, but that was for me as far as the things, the way, you know, my way of thinking, my mindset is totally different now. It's not the religious
I got you. I see you. I got you. Your
Yeah.
mindset is different now. Why? Because you have been purged.
Well,
There's
that's
a
where I
purging
was.
that has to take place.
That's where I was kind of going too. We can refashion ourselves in a sense that once we actually realize who and what we are, then we start to move more into that as opposed to moving toward religion and whatever.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
So I see what you're saying, and I guess I'm saying that it's not a refashion as much as a recognition of, or becoming aware of and accepting it.
True, I agree with that.
And it's like simply just being it. It's
Right.
being it. It's not trying to shape it or just be. Once you're aware of it, just be it.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Any other question? Comments?
I have a comment, but it's not exactly, it's related to something you wrote, but not necessarily something that we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a part, and I think it was the first part that you sent in regards to what the creator was not, or how you, something like how you could not be the creator, or what was not exemplary of being the creator, or Elohim, in terms of trying to, or being concerned with possessing certain things. And when reading that part, I was automatically thinking how the idea of mindset that you are possessing something in itself runs completely contrary and takes you out of the mindset and even acting of being being a creator, because now all of a sudden it's how to explain this. So the idea of the creator, or what the creator actually means, is to understand that you are part of everything and that you're at the same time creating everything as well, as you actually mentioned, or actually, as we've talked about many times on here. However, to actually try to only hold on to or look at trying to possess something, or that you have to possess something, is to automatically, in effect, ignore all the other aspects of being a creator, because to be a creator, it would not be trying to possess something that you already are a part of. It's almost cutting yourself off. It's almost the same thing as you being or existing, or for how we exist in the world, and we say we own this piece of land, or we own this piece of property. Well, if we identify with only owning this piece of land or owning this piece of property, we then say that the rest of the world is not ours to actually enjoy, because we don't own that particular thing. So to try to only possess some little small or defined thing is to automatically ignore your connection to all of the rest. Those two ideas cannot be held together at the same time. If there are any questions, I can elaborate, but I'm trying to figure out exactly how to put this in words.
The idea of possession. The idea of possessions is foreign to Eastern thought, especially in terms of land, property, because no one owns anything. The land belongs to everyone. This concept of deeds to property only came into existence with the introduction of Europeans to the earth. So when we talk about possessions, that in itself is different or that are adverse to our embracing who we are. Because like you said, when you know who you are, you understand that everything is you and you're everything. So why would you own 20 acres of land and you go only use 1 acre and someone else needs it in order to raise food or to live, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and also to go further, it is even if you want to look at it from a religious standpoint, it is which most of us came from. Even from that aspect, is an insult to your Creator to say that your Creator is not going to provide all these other things that that you need. A baby or a child does not think in the manner of, I must store all of the food that my mother gave me so that I can have some more food for later. It's just simply provided. And from an Eastern standpoint, traditionally, that's more so how people existed, and in indigenous environments as well, that what they need was always there and available. Even when they needed it, it was just a matter of going to get it, but not having to possess it to take it into the future.
Right. Anyone else? Questions or comments? No questions, no comments?
Hi, this is Janice. Just one comment. I just wanted to note that like our discussions have been very encouraging. And when I see the chaos in the world, you know, or end up scrolling through the news, I'm comforted by the fact that on Saturdays we put it all into context, and not just put it into context, but we shape it into something positive. And it doesn't matter what happens or what it looks like. We've got it. That's all.
Okay. I can see it. Thanks. I know it helps me get through the week.
But I wonder if that's not that's not what our purpose is. So we are fulfilling the purpose
Yes.
when we do that, Janice.
Okay.
For
Agreed.
each other and the world.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay, if not, I thank you for your time. And remain encouraged and know that we're not in this thing alone, because we are one. So have a great weekend, and we will talk later.
Okay, back at you.
I'll have
Have a great
Pastor
weekend, everyone.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.